Yo, welcome to the weekly recap with Justin and Ulam. This is a weekly series where I'll go over a summary of what we've accomplished this week in the various series that I'm playing. I'll give you some of my personal answers to the questions of the day that I've asked, and then finally I'll try to give you my idea about where I think we're going to be going in this next week. With all of that out of the way, on with the summaries. In Colosseum, as I predicted last week, we were indeed in for a very interesting boss fight, which we were able to successfully reach by the end of the first episode this week. At the time, I was really excited because I thought that meant that we would be able to spend the entire rest of the week seeing where the rest of the plot took us. That didn't end up happening. Instead, the final parts of all three of this week's episodes were crushing defeats to the current Cypher admin that we're fighting. He just turned out to have a very strong team that was noticeably higher leveled, and of all of the things to ruin us with, his final Pokemon is a Shadow Legendary, which had two problems. First off, being a Legendary, that meant that his stats are something that we really want to catch rather than have to try to beat. But on the other hand, being a Legendary also means his catch rate is horrendous. So, as you saw in this week's videos, we spent 3 attempts not really getting that close until our very final attempt did manage to end in a double knockout, but unfortunately, because of the way that Pokemon battles don't have draws, that still ended in a loss for us. By comparison to how Colosseum went this week, Golden Sun saw almost complete success. In terms of side questing, anyway. We still seem to be no closer to catching up with Felix and company, but we did manage to find Tret in the middle of Colima Forest and purge him of the evil voice that was inside him, causing him to curse the people of Colima Village and turn them into trees so that they would die when he died. Now that we've cured him of that voice, he's willing to reverse that curse on the people of Colima, but now he's so close to death, he's not powerful enough to do that. So we're going to have to find out where that goes in next week. And now, as to the questions of the week, the first one this week was asking whether or not you had ever used a self-KOing move in a playthrough. This was in response to the fact that, as you may recall from the name of that episode, Big Bang Attack, we ended up having a double enemy Geodude self-destruct turn, where, fortunately, the same turn, I had managed to get up a Reflect, which saved our other Pokemon, but unfortunately Espeon was, even with a Reflect up, not high enough defense or health to be able to take on 2 self-destructs in a turn. Partially due to the way that self-destruct move and any other self-KOing moves always mean that even if you win that fight, you end up not getting any experience for it because you fainted, and a fainted Pokemon has never been able to receive experience. I certainly have never used any self-KOing moves on a playthrough. I have, on occasion, been sort of tempted to keep one on for, potential in a gym, if it would really be able to pinch move through, but I've never actually ended up using any of them, mainly because, as you've surely seen by now in my Colosseum playthrough, I really don't like Pokemon missing out on that EXP. So, whoops. Sorry about that, dropped the list. Proceeding on to the second one, I asked if you're ready for autumn. Where I live here in Texas, the summer towards August starts to get really, really warm, hitting several over 100 days, so I can assure you I am absolutely ready for autumn. I understand that a lot of people in other parts of the world have seasons that aren't nearly as extreme as what we get here in Texas, so for a lot of other people, maybe summer's something they would have rathered, or at least summer season-wise, was something that they would have rather stuck around a little bit longer. And obviously, if you're down in the tropics, you don't really have the 4 seasons the way that we do up here in the more temperate parts of the world anyhow, and so being ready for autumn didn't really mean anything to those kinds of people either, I'm afraid. The next question that I asked was about your favorite defensive combo of elements. I could have asked this about, like, just what your favorite element is defensively. I don't remember exactly why I was asking about it, as a combo. If I were to guess, trying to remember back then to my thinking about that question, I believe it was because we were having some trouble with, well, we were having a lot of trouble, clearly, with the admin's Pokemon in general, but especially with his, not Metagross, I kept forgetting that during the episode too. Metang, there's the name. Alright, so the really advantageous thing about Metang for him was not so much its ability to be super effective, but the fact that its Psychic Steel typing made it really either resistant or pretty neutral to most of our attacks. For my purposes, for any Pokemon that I've ever used that I really liked its typing for its defensive nature of a combo, I think I would have to say my Salazzle from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, because fire and poison work together really well, and defensively, and you have to bear in mind that, as I mentioned in last week's video, I tend to really not be picking these Pokemon for their typings defensively. I'm picking them offensively, and so usually my experience with the defensive nature of these elements is incidental at best. And so I did find during my playthrough of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon that Poison and Fire was a really handy defensive typing to have, though, I mean, as you will know if you've ever used the Salazzle, it's not like it's a defensive Pokemon, so what I would notice with it was that instead of being either one-shot or two-shot by certain moves, I was very frequently finding that despite its low defensive stats, most of the time when I would send it out, it had a lot of elements that it was able to tank really well, despite being a really offensive Pokemon. If I had to go with a Pokemon that I haven't personally used, but that I do really like for conceptually for its combo, it would have to be Ferrothorn, because Steel and Grass just, I really like the idea of, especially in how it's used with Ferrothorn. The next question I asked was from when we first entered Colima Forest and we started seeing a whole bunch of spider enemies. I asked, do you consider spiders bugs? This was sort of, I really didn't know what I was going for with that question. I was referencing the fact that in the episode I noticed that while they were clearly meant to be spiders, they only had 3 legs on either side, which makes them not technically arachnids, because arachnids have 4 on either side. And so the question was sort of referencing the fact that for a lot of people, the differences between insects, arachnids, and other creepy crawlies is really just minutia that they don't care about, and so that's sort of what I was asking here, and clearly, as I'm explaining all this, and having noticed it, my answer is absolutely no. Most insects I don't have an issue with, but I have quite a bit of a problem with arachnophobia, so as part and parcel of all that, I have learned quite a bit about them, unfortunately, as well. The next question I asked was about what the longest time you'd spent stuck on a boss was. And I will have to be honest, that's a question I sort of asked because I thought it was appropriate to the fact that we've been stuck on this boss for 3 episodes now. I do not know what the longest I've been personally stuck on a boss for would be. This one here, with 3 boss fights, all of which ending in pretty much abject failure, is probably pretty high ranking. Although there have been some somewhat harder RPGs that I've played in the past that, if I were to really think back and think hard, I've probably been stuck on maybe pretty close to this. But this Cypher admin has definitely been one of the longest times I've been stuck on a boss fight. And as I've mentioned in the episodes already, a lot of that is due to the fact that I've yet to really figure out how to grind, which is part of why normally I wouldn't be stuck on the boss for that long, because if I know how to grind, then usually I'll go at it, fail once, and then just, honestly, usually I'll overgrind, because I just don't want to, I ain't got time for that nonsense. So, not knowing how to grind in Pokemon Colosseum has already really started to show a problem, and as I've been saying all throughout the series, if you know how to grind in that game, if it's the Colosseums or some other mechanic, then please do let me know in the comments, because clearly we need to figure something else out so we don't end up doing another entire week stuck on this Mount Battle. And then the final question I asked was about whether you were preferring the synergy that we were able to use in-game in Golden Sun versus the summons that we were able to use. Which, right now, all that we've really seen are the 3 basic Venus, Mars, and Jupiter summons, which are really not that impressive because it's just the Djinn coming out and then boom! An explosion. So as we proceed, we will get to see a lot more really neat summons. But I would say that for Golden Sun 1, even when you have the full roster in the first Golden Sun of summons available to you, I still feel that there are some of the synergies that I do like a lot. Like some of the late game synergies compared to the late game summons. I do prefer some of the late game synergies, like Gaia, I think I like more than pretty much any of the late game Golden Sun 1 summons. One of the really big, interesting mechanical differences between Golden Suns 1 and 2 is that in Golden Sun 1, all the summons are purely one element. So you can pour, 1 Djinn into them, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each new Djinn you pour into the summon gives it a new level, but it's still always mono-elemented. One of the big things, like I was saying, that they add in Golden Sun 2 is that you still have all of those, but you also add, I don't think like just every possible combination, but you do add a lot of combo elemented summons, and they all start to have really crazy additional secondary effects, and so along with how much more interesting that makes the gameplay, summon-wise versus synergy-wise, the Golden Sun 2's summons, especially some of those mixed ones, have a little bit more flash and flare than a lot of the Golden Sun 1 summons do. So I think by Golden Sun 2, and then definitely in Dark Dawn, yeah, the summons, I think, really knock it out of the park way more than what any of the synergies can do. Not that the synergies are bad by any means, but just that, whereas in Golden Sun 1, I do find that it's close, but I like some of the late game synergies more. It is hands down summons, some of the summons by Golden Sun 2, and then especially Dark Dawn. For Colosseum in this next week, I'm expecting that if I can do some background research and hopefully find some way of grinding up Pokemon, I think that we can get levels better and then be able to use probably that last team that I used in the 3rd episode of last week to be able to defeat the Cypher admin. So it's my plan and my hope that I'm going to have kind of a lot of gameplay skipped. I don't know, I'm still debating with myself whether or not I'm going to go ahead and just do a fairly heavily edited version of that, record it all and then just do some editing to make it not quite so boring. Because I think that element-wise and moveset-wise, we did really well in that final fight. So if we could just neutralize some of that level difference, then I'm certainly hoping that we'll be able to, just take one episode to get this stinking thing done here on Mount Battle and be able to move forward after that. But I do not know, I will admit that. So that will be pending some further research into the subject. As for Golden Sun, I believe that our next step is to head back to Colima Village. Possibly. Seeing as how Tret was unable to do anything on his own, it's possible that whatever the breadcrumb is to fixing this Colima situation might actually be all the way back in Biloblin rather than in Colima. But seeing as how Kolima's closer, I'm definitely going to go there first to check. But I do believe that following that trail is our next thing that, as I said last week, this whole thing with Tret's disease as well as then his curse is what's going to continue to be our primary objective for probably, the next few weeks, because it does cover quite a few quest steps, and we get pretty heavily sidetracked before eventually finally returning to pursuing Felix and company. And with that, that'll be it for this week's reset. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Yo! Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and leave a comment so I know you want more videos like this. If you want to know when new uploads arrive, subscribe and hit the bell icon to have YouTube send you a notification. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.